What's going on, Colts Nation? Welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice. First off, before we start this video, I just want to say thank you guys again so very much for the continued support on the channel recently. Numbers have been doing great over the since free agency started. Greatly appreciate you guys taking the time to listen to and interact with our free agent content. We're going to be putting out some draft content here soon as well. And even during the time when it's still kind of slow, we still appreciate you guys helping us out and doing all of this. And again, I greatly appreciate it. If you guys have been here for the giveaways here soon, just remember we will be doing those giveaways here very shortly. So make sure you stay tuned in on that. So you guys can tell by the title of the video, we're talking about the new overtime rules that ESPN is reporting and was basically instated by the NFL over the last day. And we're basically going to mention these and maybe a few other slight rules that got implemented along with the overtime rules. So I think everyone can remember what was happening with the Kansas City versus Buffalo game, right? Where both of these teams were going back and forth, no defense involved, offenses scoring at will, and it went into overtime because Kansas City's tied the game with 13 seconds left on the clock, and Kansas City got the ball to start overtime, and they scored a touchdown, forbidding Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bill offense from getting a shot. So people have kind of had their opinions on the possibility of overtime rules being tweaked a little bit, but nevertheless, here we are. And now the new rule being implemented that instead of there being a sudden death with a touchdown, where if a team scored a touchdown in the first drive of overtime, they would get the automatic win. It is now allowing both teams in overtime to get a chance to score a touchdown in the overtime rules. So if the first team who wins the coin toss gets a touchdown, then the opposing team also gets a chance to score a touchdown, tie the game up. And then if that were to happen, then you go to a sudden death where the next team that scores wins. Okay, so I also want to implement that this rule is only in effect for the playoffs. This is not implemented throughout the regular season. Throughout the regular season, there is going to continue to be only one team scores a touchdown on the first try, and that will be the deciding factor. That is how it's going to stay in the regular season. But in those playoff games, as was the Kansas City Chiefs and Buffalo Bills game the other time, that is what they were saying was going to be the new rule. So my overall thoughts of this were, just in case anyone cares, ultimately, I don't really care. But anyway, when we're talking about these, I've been an advocate for saying that, again, if you want your team to win, you just better get the stop anyway. I've kind of still have that opinion. I don't really care whether or not both teams get a chance. At least now, nobody can say anything about whether or not it's unfair. At least both teams are going to get a chance to get a touchdown now, and you move on as you please. So I'm okay with the rule. It doesn't bother me either way. I'm sure that the Colts would be happy with it. Speaking of the Colts, the Colts and the Eagles were one of the first proprietors to actually getting this put into place. Of course, the committee chairman, Rick May, wants to keep this as strictly a playoff thing at the time. We don't think there's going to be anything for the regular season going forward. That could change as time goes along. I'm not sure if they still have the ability to change it this offseason, but my guess is this is what's going to be the format this year, is that. And then if things need to change it, then they'll do that probably next season. But that's probably what all is going to remain right there. So ultimately, the teams voted to pass this 29-3. So pretty much 95% of the league, was a little over 90% of the league was, approving of this change. Apparently, like, there wasn't enough teams that voted yes to the regular season to do this. I think that there were I think almost I don't even know how many there were. That some were saying it might have been almost half the team. Some were saying it was just a lot more than what the teams were that didn't vote yes on the playoff one. Nevertheless, they wanted to use the playoffs as the most important rule change here. So that's why they were ultimately able to just pass that. So just to kind of give you guys a little bit of context, I mean, since the 2012 regular season, teams winning the coin toss have won about 50% of the time. It's actually risen a little bit to like 54%. In 2017, though, from 2017, I mean, there's been a big jump in the postseason. And that was the big argument, right, for why these rules need to be changed is during the postseason. This was kind of the big issue, right? Since the previous playoff format was implemented in 2010, 7 of the 12 overtime games have been won on the opening possession, and 10 of those 12 games were won by the team who won the coin toss, right? So there is basically an 83% chance, 83% of the teams that have won the opening coin toss in the playoffs since 2010 have won a game in overtime based off these rules, right? So that's why they felt that this was going to be a necessary jump to, enable to try to make it a little bit more fair, to try to make it at least doable for the opposing team to try and win. We'll see how this goes. And also just another thing as well, owners also approved one additional rule change and resolution. They made the 2021 experiment that adjusted positioning in the setup zone on kickoffs to increase the recovery rate of onside kicks, as if it needed to be any easier for them to do it. But nevertheless, also as well for the new resolution as well, teams are changed the league's tampering policy to allow teams to retain members of their player personnel staff through the draft. So from that point to June 30th, those teams would be required to allow staff members to interview other teams. It only applies to non-high level executives. So yeah, that's basically it, guys. Let me know what you think of the NFL changing the overtime rules. Do you think that the NFL should have just kept it the way it was, or should just revert back to it, especially in the playoffs, of just, first team that scores a touchdown wins the game? Me personally, the other reason why I always said that as well is, I know it's going to sound cliche to some people, and I don't really care either. When it comes to these players' health, we've already talked, a lot about this extra 17th game, right? And how it could potentially have a long-term effect on some of these guys, some of them getting hurt in one of these last games. And, just that extra time to play, I mean, could really, that could be one more extra drive that, could potentially get one of these guys hurt. We're already talking about player safety, player health, and everything, and extending things as is. And now this is just potentially extending these circumstances even more. Now, I also get the argument of it's the playoffs, it's the season's on the line. I get that as well. So at the same time, I'm kind of understanding it as well. So, or do you think that these rules are going to continue to be improved and these need to be implemented? And it's a good thing that the NFL is adding these rules together, especially for overtime rules. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Thank you guys again so much for the continued support, as always. And as always, go Colts.